The recent announcement of the two juggernauts in the welterweight division, set to duke it out one-on-one as a unification bout in the 147 division for the WBC, IBF, and WBA super belt. This is Spence versus Ugas. To understand the matchup, you must first understand the style matchup. On one hand, you have Ugas, the Cuban-schooled boxer who is a brilliant counterpuncher, and that just came off his big win against Manny Pacquiao, squaring off against Spence, who some consider a boxer-puncher. Spence has a very effective and economical style of being an aggressive fighter, with an extensive background in amateur boxing that extends all the way to the Olympics. Spence has a high-rate boxing style in which, when he fought against Danny Garcia and Porter, he had over 700 punches. He likes to throw combinations and work the body, but big enough, he likes to work behind the jab. I've always been a big underdog fan in huge fights. So today, we're going to explore the keys to victory that Ugas needs to establish if he wants to beat Spence. In terms of opponents, both have faced high oppositions, but there is one opponent that they both have in common, and that is Shawn Porter. Shawn Porter, being an aggressive, athletic boxer himself, between Porter and Spence, they both threw over 700 punches in that fight according to CompuBox. But when Shawn Porter and Ugas fought, the punch stats were slightly different, as Porter threw a little 500 punches, as Ugas threw under 450. What this shows is that if Ugas is an effective enough counterpuncher, he can really tone down the output of the aggressive fighter that he is facing off against. Not to compare Mayweather and Ugas, as both are completely different fighters, but what they both have in common is that they're good counterpunchers. And when you're able to counter well against aggressive fighters, you're able to control the tempo of the fight, and you're able to control the pace. Because every time your opponent tries to start something offensively, if they're constantly getting hit, the shift in the speed of the fight will drastically slow down. In recent fights, Spence has faced off against very good counterpunchers, and that of Mikey Garcia and Danny Garcia. Of those two fights, he arguably lost 3 rounds at most when he faced Danny Garcia. When he faced Mikey Garcia, Mikey was jumping up in weight, and he completely got hammered for 12 rounds, losing a 12-point decision. Some even argued that Mikey Garcia was way too small when he faced Spence, and the size difference was just too critical. When Spence faced Danny Garcia, he arguably lost 3 rounds. Danny, to me, made his bones at 140, the super lightweight division, where his power actually kept his opponents honest. When he moved up in welterweights, to me, the oppositions were just too big for him, as when he fought big names, he was very inconsistent in terms of his wins, as he lost all 3 big fights against Thurman, Porter, and Spence. Also, I feel like Danny and Mikey's style is completely different from Ugas. For one, Mikey was just too small for the matchup. For 2, Danny, I feel like he looks too much for the one-punch knockout, and he really doesn't set up his shots well, and he has really slow feet. When it comes to Ugas, he's going to be a much bigger man, as about the same size, with the same reach as Spence. In my humble opinion, I feel that Ugas is a much bigger threat than the guys that Spence has faced. He has very good discipline, quick feet, works well with the guard, works behind the jab, and has that really good Cuban right hand, which is critical against the southpaw when he's facing Spence. When he fought Pacquiao, although Pacquiao was considered washed up by most, he still looked very good considering that. He kept Pacquiao from establishing his offense, as he was never truly able to get anything going, but that was due largely to Ugas being able to land very good counterpunches. So this matchup really comes down to 2 things. Will Spence be able to continue his dominance and work behind the jab, defeating Ugas with a high work rate, or will Ugas be able to control the pace of the fight with effective counterpunches? Both are still durable fighters and have a lot left to offer the game. I don't see a knockout or a stoppage, but what I do see is a controversial decision. Or maybe if all the stars align, we'll see a split decision for Ugas. Spence fights in a high punch output. This means that he needs to really get in rhythm to get things going. The way how you slow a fighter down is by going to his body. By going to the body, you essentially take away the legs and leak the gas tank. I mean, ask yourself, how effective is a bulldozer if the bulldozer is low on gas and is rolling on flat tires? When Garcia faced Spence, the few rounds that he didn't win on the judges' scorecards, he won through effective body punching. Body shots allowed Garcia to free Spence and take him out of rhythm so he couldn't effectively start his offense. This allowed Garcia to slow down the tempo of the fight, which allowed him to create more openings for the right cross and overhands. Spence is a very special kind of southpaw. Normally southpaws focus mainly on lead lefts and hooks, as that's the bread and butter. Spence, on the other hand, likes to work heavily behind the jab, which is normally non-existent in many southpaw fighters. By Spence fighting at a high tempo, he relies heavily on rhythm, and which that rhythm, and many times, begins with the jab. It's really hard to beat Spence when he's on rhythm, because once he starts landing his jabs, it starts opening up shots to the body, and once he starts going to the body, there's going to be openings to the head. I really do feel that Ugas does possess the tools to take the jab away from Spence. He's really good at taking away the jab in terms of either countering or catching his opponents coming in. When he faced Sean Porter, even though Porter was more of an in-and-out fighter, he was able to time him coming in. I feel like Spence's approach is a little bit slower, but when he pops that jab, I think Ugas will be able to take that play away from him and disrupt his rhythm. To me personally, and my most humble opinions, I really think Ugas' biggest threat to Spence is that he's capable of disrupting rhythm by punching between combinations. Although Pacquiao was considered old, to me, I still felt like he had a lot more speed to offer than Spence. Ugas had much smaller windows to work with for Pacquiao, and he was still able to punch through his combinations. And if you're concerned about Spence being stronger, I feel that Ugas has the size to withstand the strength. Ugas isn't stationary like Danny Garcia when he counters. He also fights very well going off his back foot. Here, when he was fighting Porter, he was able to fight on his back foot and still be able to counter and punch between Porter's combinations and punches. For me, this will be the most formidable challenger to Spence, as Ugas has the size and style to disrupt a lot of Spence's offense. To me, the kryptonite to every great offensive fighter has always been the counterpuncher. Think Ali versus Frazier, Chavez Jr. versus Whitaker, Pacquiao versus Marquez. That's the last weapon that many aren't talking about in terms of Ugas. The main punch between orthodox versus southpaw is the right cross. Ugas doesn't have just any typical right. He has that Cuban right cross. The right cross that is a hybrid between a straight cross and an overhand right. He's also effective to the body. Don't forget, he also landed 59% power punches against Pacquiao.